The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor 3 feet from where I stood. Crystal fragments scattered like tiny diamonds across the white tile, and the entire ballroom went silent. Every guest at the Romano estate froze, forks hovering over plates, conversations dying mid-sentence. Eyes wide with shock, I didn't flinch. Lorenzo Romano, the most feared man in Chicago, stared at me with those dark, calculating eyes. His jaw was tight, his hands still raised from the throw. Around us, 200 people held their breath, waiting to see if I would become another cautionary tale. "You spilled wine on my jacket," he said quietly. Too quietly. "That's how dangerous men spoke before they destroyed you. You walked into me," I replied, keeping my voice steady even though my heart hammered against my ribs. Someone gasped. A woman in diamonds clutched her husband's arm. The security guard shifted, hands moving toward concealed weapons. Lorenzo's eyes narrowed. "Do you know who I am? Should I care?" The words left my mouth before I could stop them. 23 years of refusing to bow down to anyone had become reflex. His expression changed. Surprise flickered across his face before something darker replaced it. Something that looked almost like interest. "Everyone cares," he said, taking a step closer. "Everyone in this city knows my name." "I've been here 2 weeks," I said. Still learning. That was partially true. I'd moved to Chicago from Seattle 2 weeks ago, desperate for a fresh start after my life imploded. New city, new job as an event coordinator, new chance to rebuild. I didn't know Lorenzo Romano owned half the city. Didn't know his family controlled everything from the docks to City Hall. I definitely didn't know he had twin sons, but I was about to learn everything the hard way. Lorenzo studied me like I was a puzzle he couldn't solve. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable, and still, nobody moved. The ballroom felt smaller suddenly, as if his presence consumed all the oxygen. "Your name," he commanded. "Maya Torres." I lifted my chin higher. My mother always said my stubborn pride would get me killed someday. Maybe today was that day. "Maya Torres," he repeated slowly, tasting each syllable. "You're the new coordinator Francesca hired." It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. Francesca Vitali ran the event planning company I'd joined. She'd seemed kind during the interview, though I'd noticed how everyone spoke about her clients with reverence mixed with fear. Now I understood why. "This is your first Romano event," Lorenzo continued. "Yes, and your last." He turned to one of his guards. "Escort Ms. Torres out. She's no longer welcome at any Romano property." My stomach dropped. This job was everything: my rent, my bills, my chance to prove I could handle starting over. Without it, I'd be back to sleeping in my car within a month. "Wait," I said, hating how desperate I sounded. "I apologized for the wine." "You didn't apologize." Lorenzo's smile was cold. "You blamed me because you weren't watching where you were going." Another collective gasp rippled through the crowd. A man near the bar actually covered his face with his hands. Lorenzo's smile widened, but there was no humor in it. "Interesting. You're either incredibly brave or remarkably stupid." "Neither," I said. "Just honest. Honesty in my world is dangerous." "Then maybe your world needs better rules." The guard reached for my arm, but Lorenzo raised his hand, stopping him. For a long moment, Lorenzo just watched me. I could see his mind working, calculating something I couldn't begin to understand. "Tomorrow morning," he said finally. 9 o'clock. My office at Romano Enterprises. "Don't be late." Then he walked away, leaving me standing in a sea of broken glass while 200 people stared at me like I'd just signed my own death warrant. I barely slept that night. My tiny apartment felt even smaller as I paced between the kitchen and the bedroom, replaying the encounter over and over. Every sensible part of my brain screamed at me to run. Pack up, leave Chicago, disappear before Lorenzo Romano decided to make an example of me. But I'd run before. I'd left Seattle with nothing but a suitcase and shame, escaping a boyfriend who'd stolen my savings and a best friend who'd helped him do it. I'd promised myself no more running. Besides, curiosity gnawed at me. Why hadn't Lorenzo had me thrown out immediately? Why schedule a meeting? Men like him didn't waste time on people who disrespected them. At 8:30 the next morning, I stood outside Romano Enterprises, a gleaming tower of glass and steel in downtown Chicago. My hand shook as I pushed through the revolving doors into a lobby that screamed money and power. "Maya Torres," I told the receptionist. "I have an appointment with Mr. Romano." She looked at me with something like pity. "Top floor. Take the private elevator on the left." The ride up felt eternal. Smooth jazz played softly, mocking my racing pulse. When the doors opened, I stepped into an office that could have been featured in architecture magazines. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, and everything from the furniture to the art on the walls probably cost more than my entire life. Lorenzo sat behind a massive desk, dressed in a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly. He didn't look up when I entered. "Sit," he said, still focused on whatever document he was reading. I sat in one of the leather chairs across from him and waited. Silence stretched between us like a test. I refused to squirm. Finally, he set down his pen and met my eyes. "Tell me about yourself." "There's not much to tell," I said carefully. "I'm 23. I moved here from Seattle. I'm good at organizing events. Why Chicago?" Lorenzo leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled under his chin. Fresh start, running from something. His directness caught me off guard. "Isn't everyone?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Fair point." He pulled a folder from his desk and opened it. "Maya Elena Torres. Born in Los Angeles. Graduated from UCLA with a degree in hospitality management. Worked at 3 different event companies in Seattle over the past 2 years. References call you talented but stubborn." My chest tightened. He'd had me investigated overnight. "You've been busy." "I'm always busy," he said. "The question is whether you're worth my time. You're the one who called this meeting because you interest me." He closed the folder. "Most people grovel when they realize who I am. You didn't. Should I have?" "Yes, no hesitation." "But you didn't, and that tells me something." I waited, unsure where this was going. "I have twin sons," Lorenzo said. "They're 6 years old. Their mother died when they were babies, and raising them alone has been complicated." The shift in conversation threw me. "I'm sorry for your loss." He waved away my sympathy. "I need someone to coordinate their 7th birthday party. It needs to be perfect, extravagant, memorable." "I plan corporate events," I said slowly. "Not children's parties. You plan whatever I pay you to plan." His tone left no room for argument. "The party is in 3 weeks. I'll pay you $50,000. I almost fell out of my chair. $50,000. That was more than I'd made in the entire past year. "That's excessive for a birthday party." I managed. "Nothing involving my sons is excessive." Lorenzo stood and walked to the windows. "They're everything to me." "Why me?" I asked, finding my voice. "You could hire anyone. People who specialize in this." Lorenzo kept his back to me, looking out at the city that practically belonged to him. "Because you're not afraid of me. My sons need someone around them who won't teach them that fear is how you get respect." The statement hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. This was a test, I realized. Everything with Lorenzo Romano was a test. "I'll do it," I said before I could overthink it. He turned around, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked almost pleased. "Good. You'll start today. My assistant will give you access to everything you need. Unlimited budget, full staff cooperation." "What are their names?" I asked. "Your sons, Marco and Matteo." His expression softened when he said their names, so slight I almost missed it. "Marco is older by 3 minutes. He's quiet, thoughtful, cautious. Matteo is louder, bolder, always testing boundaries, like their father." Lorenzo's eyes snapped to mine, sharp and assessing. Then, surprisingly, he laughed. It was a low, genuine sound that transformed his entire face. "Perhaps. When can I meet them?" "This afternoon. I'll have my driver bring you to the house." House, he probably meant mansion. Men like Lorenzo Romano didn't live in houses. I stood, extending my hand. "Thank you for the opportunity." He looked at my outstretched hand for a moment before taking it. His grip was firm, his skin warm. "Don't make me regret this, Maya." "I won't." But as I left his office and rode the elevator back down, a strange feeling settled in my stomach. Something about this whole situation felt off. Lorenzo Romano hadn't built an empire by being sentimental or by hiring event coordinators who insulted him at parties. There was something else going on here. Something I couldn't see yet. I just didn't know how dangerous that something would become. The Romano estate sat 30 minutes outside the city, hidden behind iron gates and tall hedges that screamed privacy and security. As Lorenzo's driver pulled up the circular driveway, I pressed my face against the window like a kid, taking in the sprawling property. It wasn't just a mansion, it was a compound. The main house looked like something from an Italian villa, all stone and arched windows. Gardens stretched in every direction, perfectly manicured. I spotted a pool, a tennis court, and what might have been a guest house larger than most people's primary homes. "Ms. Torres," the driver opened my door. "Mr. Romano is waiting in the east wing." Inside, the house was even more impressive. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, art that belonged in museums. But despite the luxury, something felt cold about it. Empty, like a beautiful cage. A woman in her 50s met me in the foyer. She had kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. "I'm Carlotta, the house manager." "Welcome, thank you." I followed her through hallways that seemed to go on forever. "The boys are in the playroom," Carlotta said. "Mr. Romano thought it best if you met them in a comfortable environment. Has he told them who I am?" "Only that you're planning their party." She paused outside a set of double doors. "They're good boys, sweet, but be prepared they can tell when adults are lying to them." Before I could ask what she meant, she opened the doors. The playroom was massive, filled with toys, books, and two identical boys with dark hair and their father's sharp eyes. They were building something with blocks, heads bent together in concentration. "Marco, Matteo," Carlotta said gently. "This is Ms. Torres. She's going to help with your birthday." Both boys looked up. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. They were beautiful dark curls, olive skin, expressions that shifted from curiosity to caution in seconds. "Hi," I said, kneeling to their level. "You can call me Maya." The boy on the left stood up first. Everything about him was careful, his movements, his expression, the way he held himself slightly back. "Marco, I guessed. Dad said you're planning our party," he said quietly. "That's right," I smiled. "What kind of party do you want?" "Something normal," the other boy Matteo said, jumping to his feet with energy that made me think of puppies. "Not boring like last year." "Matteo," Marco warned softly. "It's true." Matteo crossed his arms. "Last year Dad hired someone who made us wear matching suits and shake hands with people we didn't know. It was terrible." I bit back a laugh. "No matching suits this year." "I promise." Matteo's eyes lit up. "Really, really? This is your party. You should have fun." Marco studied me with an intensity that reminded me eerily of his father. "What if we want something Dad doesn't approve of?" "Smart kid. Then we'll find a compromise." "But I need to know what you actually want, not what you think people expect you to want." The boys exchanged a glance, some silent communication passing between them. Then Matteo grinned. "Pirates, pirates." I repeated, "with sword fights and treasure hunts and a real ship." Matteo was practically bouncing now. "And everyone has to dress up, even Dad. Especially Dad," Marco added. And there was a hint of mischief in his voice that made him seem more like a regular kid than the son of Chicago's most powerful man. "I can work with pirates," I said. "Anything else?" Marco hesitated. "Can our friends from school come? Not just Dad's business partners?" The way he said it broke my heart a little. "Of course. Make me a list of everyone you want there." For the next hour, I sat on the floor with them, taking notes as they planned their ideal party. Matteo did most of the talking, ideas tumbling out faster than I could write. Marco contributed quietly, adding thoughtful details that made everything better. I was so focused on the boys that I didn't notice Lorenzo standing in the doorway until Marco looked past me and went still. "Dad," he said quietly. I turned. Lorenzo leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching us with an expression I couldn't read. How long had he been there? "Having fun?" he asked. Maya said we can have a pirate party, Matteo announced, running to his father. "With real swords, not real, but like fake ones that look real, and a treasure hunt with prizes." "Did she?" Lorenzo's eyes met mine over Matteo's head. "The birthday boys should get what they want," I said, standing and brushing off my jeans. "Within reason, and matching suits." Marco asked his father hopefully. "We don't have to wear them." Something flickered across Lorenzo's face. "You hated those, didn't you?" Both boys nodded. Double quotes. "Then no matching suits," Lorenzo said. He ruffled Matteo's hair, and I saw a side of him I hadn't expected: gentle, present, genuinely loving. "But you'll still dress appropriately. We'll find something pirate-themed, yes?" Matteo pumped his fist in the air. Lorenzo looked at me. "Can I speak with you privately?" Of course, I followed him out of the playroom, aware of the boys' eyes tracking us. He led me to a library down the hall, all dark wood and leather-bound books. The door clicked shut behind us. "They like you," he said. I like them. They're good kids, they are. Lorenzo moved to a side table where crystal decanters sat on a silver tray. Drink. It's 2 in the afternoon. I didn't ask for the time. He poured himself whiskey. They don't trust easily. Neither do I. Is there a point to this conversation? I asked. He turned, glass in hand, studying me again with that unsettling intensity. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone who would bow and scrape. Someone afraid to contradict me. Sorry to disappoint, I said, though I wasn't sorry at all. Lorenzo smiled, a real one that reached his eyes. You're not disappointing me. That's the problem. I didn't know what to say to that, so I stayed quiet. My sons have had 5 nannies in the past year, he continued. All of them quit. Do you know why? Because you're intimidating? Because they were afraid of me, yes. But also because Marco and Matteo could sense their fear. Children always can. He took a sip of whiskey. You're not afraid, should I be? Probably. He set down his glass. I'm not a good man, Maya. I've done things that would make you run if you knew the details. But I'm trying to be a good father. The vulnerability in his admission surprised me. This wasn't the cold, calculating man from the ballroom. This was someone who actually cared about something beyond power and control. They seem happy, I said carefully. They deserve better than what I can give them. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. Their mother died protecting them. Every day I fail to keep them safe dishonors her memory. You're keeping them safe, I said. They're loved. That counts for something. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and something passed between us. Understanding, maybe. Recognition that we were both trying to be better than our circumstances. The party, he said, breaking the moment. You have full authority. Spend what you need. Hire who you want. If anyone gives you trouble, tell them to call me. Thank you, and Maya. He stepped closer. If you hurt my sons, if you betray my trust, there won't be anywhere you can run. Do you understand? There was the dangerous man I'd expected. I understand. But I won't hurt them, I mean. He nodded once. Then we have an agreement. As I left the estate that afternoon, my mind spun with everything I'd learned. The Romano twins were sweet, smart, and surprisingly normal despite their father's empire. And Lorenzo himself was more complicated than I'd imagined. 3 days into planning the party, I practically lived at the Romano estate. Carlotta set me up in a small office off the main library, and I spent hours coordinating with vendors, designing invitations, and meeting with the boys to finalize details. Marco and Matteo became my shadows. They'd wander in after their tutoring sessions. Lorenzo didn't send them to regular school for security reasons and help with whatever I was working on. Matteo would chatter about his ideas while Marco quietly drew elaborate plans for the treasure hunt. What if the treasure is at the bottom of the pool? Matteo suggested one afternoon, sprawled across my desk. Then someone would have to dive for it, I said, typing up the vendor list. Dad can dive really deep. He was in the military. That caught my attention. I hadn't known Lorenzo had military training. It explained the way he carried himself, though that controlled precision in every movement. Were you scared? Marco asked suddenly. I looked up from my laptop. When? At the party. When you talked back to Dad. Matteo sat up, equally curious. I considered lying, but remembered Carlotta's warning about them knowing when adults weren't truthful. Yes, I admitted. I was terrified. You didn't look scared, Marco said. That's because I'm stubborn. My mom says I inherited it from my grandmother, who once told off a police officer who tried to give her a parking ticket. Both boys giggled. Did she get the ticket? Matteo asked. She got 3 tickets. But she felt better about it. They laughed harder, and I found myself smiling. These moments with them felt easy, natural, like I'd known them longer than a few days. The door opened and Lorenzo walked in, phone pressed to his ear. He was mid-conversation, his voice sharp with authority. I don't care what Alessandro thinks. The deal goes through tomorrow or not at all. The boys immediately straightened, their playfulness dimming. Lorenzo ended the call and looked at his sons. What are you two doing in here? Where's Carlotta? We finished our lessons early, Marco said quietly. We wanted to help Maya. She's working. You're bothering her. They're not bothering me, I said quickly. They're helping. Lorenzo's expression softened slightly. Still, you both have free time. Go outside. Play. Can Maya come? Matteo asked hopefully. Maya has a job to do. Actually, I said, saving my document, I could use some fresh air. And I need to see the garden to plan the treasure hunt route. Lorenzo looked like he wanted to argue, but Matteo was already tugging on my hand, pulling me toward the door. Marco followed more slowly, glancing back at his father. 30 minutes, Lorenzo called after us. Then back inside. The gardens were even more beautiful up close. Roses bloomed along stone pathways, and a massive fountain dominated the center courtyard. The boys ran ahead, their laughter echoing off the hedges. I walked slower, taking mental notes about where we could hide treasure chests and set up challenges. The whole time, I felt eyes on me. When I turned, I saw Lorenzo watching from a window 3 stories up. Our eyes met across the distance. Even from there, I could feel the weight of his gaze. "Maya, come on!" Matteo shouted from behind a hedge. I waved at Lorenzo before following the boys. But that moment stayed with me the way he'd watched us, expression unreadable. Protective, maybe, or suspicious. That evening, as I packed up to leave, Carlotta appeared with a manila envelope. "Mr. Romano asked me to give this to you," she said. "Inside were building plans for the garden, including underground passages I didn't know existed. There was also a note in sharp handwriting, for your treasure hunt. Use the east tunnel, it's the most secure." I stared at the plans, touched that he'd thought of this, that he was helping make his son's party perfect. 1 week before the party, everything was falling into place. The vendors were confirmed, the decorations ordered, the guest list finalized. Marco and Matteo grew more excited each day, counting down until their birthday with the pure enthusiasm only children possess. I spent less time in my apartment and more time at the estate, often working late into the night. Lorenzo would sometimes join me in the library, working on his own business while I handled party logistics. We didn't talk much during those hours, but the silence felt comfortable, companionable. "You should go home," he said one night around midnight. "It's late." I looked up from the seating chart I'd been rearranging. "Almost done. You said that 2 hours ago. Had it been 2 hours?" I glanced at the clock and realized he was right. "I want everything perfect. It will be." Lorenzo closed his laptop. "You're good at this. Planning parties. Caring about people." He stood, moving to the window. It was his thinking spot, I'd noticed. "My sons have smiled more in the past 2 weeks than the previous 6 months combined. They're easy to care about, are they?" He turned to face me. "Or are you just better at seeing people than most?" The compliment caught me off guard. "I don't know what you mean. You looked at me in that ballroom and saw someone who needed to be challenged. You look at my sons and see children who need normalcy. You look at this party and see an opportunity to give them memories instead of just another obligation." He moved closer to my desk. "You see what people need, not what they pretend to need." My heart hammered. That's just basic empathy. In my world, empathy is rare. His eyes held mine. "It makes you dangerous." "To who?" "To me." The air between us felt charged suddenly, heavy with something I didn't want to name. This was my boss. My employer. Nothing more, but the way Lorenzo looked at me suggested he was thinking the same complicated thoughts. "I should go," I said, standing abruptly. Papers scattered across my desk. "It is late." Lorenzo didn't move. "Maya." I paused, my hand on the door. "Be careful," he said quietly. "Getting close to people in my world, it doesn't end well. I'm just planning a party. We both know it's more than that now." He was right, and that terrified me. Somewhere in the past 2 weeks, I'd stopped thinking of this as just a job. The boys had become important to me. And Lorenzo dangerous, complicated Lorenzo had become something I couldn't quite define. "Good night," I said, and left before he could say anything else. At home, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation. What was I doing? Getting attached to a Mafia King and his sons was the definition of terrible judgment. I should finish the party and walk away clean, but I already knew I wouldn't. The next morning, I arrived at the estate to find chaos. Carlotta met me at the door, wringing her hands. "Thank God you're here," she said. "It's Matteo." My stomach dropped. "What happened?" "He's gone. Marco says they were playing hide and seek in the gardens an hour ago, and Matteo never came back." I ran to the library where Lorenzo stood surrounded by security guards, barking orders into his phone. His face was pale, his usual control fractured. "How long?" I demanded. 73 minutes, a guard replied. "We've searched the entire property twice." "The tunnels," I said, remembering the building plans. "Has anyone checked the underground passages?" Lorenzo's eyes snapped to mine. "Matteo doesn't know about those." "Are you sure?" He wasn't. I could see the uncertainty flicker across his face. "Marco," I said, spotting the boy huddled in a corner, tears streaming down his face. I knelt beside him. "Marco, sweetie, did you and Matteo ever explore underground? Maybe places you weren't supposed to go." He looked at his father, then back at me, then nodded miserably. "We found a door in the garden shed. It led down to tunnels. Matteo wanted to explore them. Lorenzo was already moving. Show me." Now, we ran to the garden shed, Lorenzo practically carrying Marco. Inside, behind some tools, was indeed a small door I'd never noticed. It hung open. "Matteo!" Lorenzo shouted down into the darkness. His voice echoed back. "Empty. We need flashlights," I said. "And someone to stay up here with Marco." Carlotta appeared, pulling Marco into her arms. "I'll keep him safe." Lorenzo grabbed two flashlights from a security guard and handed me one. "Stay behind me." "No, we cover more ground if we split up." "Absolutely not. These tunnels connect to the old underground railroad routes. There are miles of them, and most aren't structurally sound. Then we need to hurry." We descended into darkness, our flashlights cutting through the musty air. The tunnel was narrow, the ceiling low enough that Lorenzo had to duck. Water dripped somewhere in the distance. "Matteo!" I called. "It's Maya. If you can hear me, make noise." Nothing. We walked for what felt like forever, the tunnel branching off in multiple directions. Lorenzo made quick decisions at each intersection, some instinct guiding him through the maze. Then I heard a small voice, barely audible. "Dad!" "Matteo!" Lorenzo took off running. I followed, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly. We found him in a small chamber where the tunnel opened up. He was sitting against the wall, hugging his knees, tears streaking his dirty face. Relief crashed through me so hard I almost fell. Lorenzo reached him first, dropping to his knees and pulling Matteo into his arms. "You're okay. You're okay. I'm sorry," Matteo sobbed. "I got lost. I couldn't find the way back, and it was dark, and I was scared." "Shh, you're safe now." Lorenzo held him tighter, and I saw his hands shaking. I knelt beside them. "You're very brave, Matteo." Staying calm and calling for help was exactly right. He looked at me with those dark eyes, so like his father's. "I wasn't brave. I was scared." "Being brave doesn't mean not being scared," I said gently. "It means doing the right thing even when you are scared." Lorenzo stood, lifting Matteo into his arms despite the boy being almost too big to carry. "Let's get you home." The walk back was quieter. Matteo buried his face in his father's shoulder while Lorenzo murmured reassurances in Italian. I followed behind, my own relief making my legs weak. When we emerged into sunlight, Marco broke free from Carlotta and ran to his brother. The twins hugged tightly, and I had to look away before I started crying. That evening, after Matteo had been checked by a doctor, fed, bathed, and put to bed, Lorenzo found me in the library where I'd been pretending to work. "He's asking for you," Lorenzo said. I followed him upstairs to a bedroom I'd never seen before. It was warm and lived in, with drawings covering the walls and toys scattered across the floor. Matteo and Marco shared a massive bed, and both boys looked tiny against the pillows. "Maya," Matteo reached for my hand. "Will you tell us a story?" I glanced at Lorenzo, who nodded. I sat on the edge of the bed and made up a story about a brave pirate who got lost in a cave but found his way home by following the stars. Both boys listened intently, their eyes growing heavy. "The pirate wasn't alone though," I added softly. "He had his brother with him, and his father, who taught him to be brave, and friends who never stopped looking for him. That's the secret about being lost or never truly lost. If people love you." Marco fell asleep first, then Matteo. I stood carefully, not wanting to wake them. Lorenzo waited in the hallway. We walked downstairs in silence, the weight of the day settling over us both. In the library, he poured two glasses of whiskey and handed me one without asking. I took it. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for knowing about the tunnels. For helping find him. I didn't do much. You did everything." He drank deeply. "If something had happened to him, but it didn't single quotes t. Lorenzo set down his glass and turned to me. "You're afraid of me." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "Sometimes. Good. You should be." He moved closer. "But you help me anyway. You care about my sons anyway." "Why?" "Because they're children who deserve care. It's not complicated. Everything in my life is complicated." "Then maybe you're making it that way." His laugh was harsh. "You think I choose this life?" This isolation. I think you built walls to protect yourself. And now you're trapped inside them. Careful. Maya, you're speaking about things you don't understand. Then explain them to me. For a long moment, he just looked at me. Then, surprisingly, he started talking. I was 19 when I took over my father's business. He was killed by a rival family shot in our driveway while I watched from an upstairs window. I was supposed to go to college, become a lawyer, something legitimate. His voice was flat, emotionless. Instead, I became this. You didn't have a choice. We always have choices. I chose revenge. Chose power. Chose to make sure no one could ever hurt my family again. He finished his whiskey. Then I met Alessandra, my wife. She was different kind, gentle, everything I wasn't. She saw something in me worth saving. She loved you, I said softly. She died because of me. Because my enemies wanted to hurt me. And she was the easiest target, his hands clenched into fists. The twins were 6 months old. She threw herself over their cribs when the men broke in. Took for bullets meant for them. My chest ached. Lorenzo, I killed every single person involved. Then I killed their families, their associates, anyone who might have known about the plan. He finally looked at me, and his eyes were dead. That's who I am, Maya. That's the man whose sons you're growing attached to. I should have been horrified. Should have run. But instead, I saw a broken man trying desperately to protect the only good things left in his life. Your sons don't know that man, I said. They know their father who tucks them in and listens to their ideas and lets them have pirate parties. Both men exist, then be the father more than the monster. Lorenzo laughed bitterly. You make it sound simple. It is simple. Not easy, but simple. He moved closer until we were inches apart. Why aren't you afraid right now? I am afraid. My voice came out steadier than I felt. But I'm also seeing you. The real you. And I don't think you're as much of a monster as you want me to believe. You're wrong, am I? He reached up, his hand hovering near my face but not quite touching. I could ruin your life. You could. But you won't. How do you know? Because you're trying so hard to warn me away. Real monsters don't warn people. Something in his expression cracked. Maya, a knock interrupted us. A guard opened the door, looking apologetic. Sir, we have a situation. Lorenzo's face became a mask instantly. What kind of situation? Antonio Marchesi just arrived at the gate. He's demanding to see you. Every muscle in Lorenzo's body went tight. Get Maya home, now. Who's Antonio Marchesi? I asked. Someone dangerous. Lorenzo was already moving toward the door. Go home, Maya. Don't come back until I call you. But the party, forget the party. Just go. The fear in his voice terrified me more than anything he'd confessed earlier. As the guard escorted me out through a back exit, I looked back to see Lorenzo disappearing down the hall. His whole posture radiating controlled violence. Something was very wrong. At home. I paced my apartment, phone in hand, waiting for some kind of update. Nothing came. Hours passed, then a full day. My calls to Lorenzo went straight to voicemail. My messages to Carlotta went unanswered. By the third day of silence, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove back to the Romano estate, only to find the gates locked and guarded by men I didn't recognize. They refused to let me in, refused to even confirm whether Lorenzo was home. I called Francesca, my boss at the event company. What's going on? I demanded. I need to finish planning the party, and no one will answer my calls. Maya. Francesca's voice was careful. You need to stop calling. Why? What happened? I can't tell you. Just trust me. Stay away from the Romanos. It's not safe. She hung up. I sat in my car outside the estate gates for an hour, my mind racing with possibilities. Had something happened to the boys? To Lorenzo? Was this about Antonio Marchesi? Finally, my phone rang. Unknown number. Hello. Ms. Torres, a woman's voice, cold and professional. This is Victoria Marchesi, Antonio's wife. We need to speak. My blood ran cold. About what? About the Romano twins. And a mistake that was made 6 years ago. She paused. Meet me at Cafe Moretti in 1 hour. Come alone, or Lorenzo's sons will pay the price. The line went dead. Every instinct screamed at me not to go. This was a trap. It had to be. But the threat against Marco and Matteo was too specific, too real. I couldn't risk ignoring it. Cafe Moretti was a small Italian restaurant in a neighborhood I didn't know. I arrived early, scanning for threats, for anything out of place. Victoria Marchesi sat alone at a corner table, dressed elegantly, looking nothing like the dangerous crime wife I'd expected. "Sit," she said when she saw me. I sat, every muscle coiled tight. "Lorenzo doesn't know about this meeting," Victoria said. "And he won't. Do you understand? Why am I here?" She pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. "Because you care about those boys. And you deserve to know the truth." I opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside were medical documents, DNA tests, birth certificates. It took me a moment to understand what I was reading. Then my world tilted. "That's impossible," I whispered. Staring at the DNA results, "It's not only possible, it happened." Victoria's expression was grim. 6 years ago, I gave birth to twin boys at the same hospital where Alessandra Romano delivered. Same night, same floor. The babies were in the nursery together, and someone switched them. The words felt unreal. Not someone. The nurse who processed them made a mistake. She mixed up the identification bracelets. Victoria leaned forward. "One of Lorenzo's sons isn't his biological child. He's mine. And one of my sons is his." I couldn't breathe. "Does Lorenzo know?" "Not yet. Antonio only discovered the truth 2 weeks ago when our son needed a blood transfusion after an accident. The blood type didn't match either of us." She tapped the folder. "We had DNA testing done. That's when we found out." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Antonio wants his biological son back. And he's willing to start a war to get him." The cafe suddenly felt too small, too close. "You can't just take one of them. They're brothers. They've been raised together. All I know." Victoria's voice cracked slightly. "Believe me, I know what this will do to them. But Antonio is determined. He's already contacted Lorenzo with demands." That explained the sudden silence. The locked gates. Lorenzo was trying to protect his sons from a truth that would destroy their family. "Which one?" I asked. "Which twin is ... Victoria hesitated. "We're not entirely sure yet. The original mix-up makes it complicated. We need to test both boys to know for certain. You can't do that without Lorenzo's permission." Lorenzo isn't being reasonable. He's refusing to even discuss it. Victoria's eyes hardened. "Antonio will take both boys if necessary and test them himself. Or Lorenzo can cooperate and we can handle this quietly." "This isn't quiet. This is threatening children. This is protecting my son." Victoria stood. "You have until the party 3 days to convince Lorenzo to agree to the testing. If he doesn't, Antonio will take matters into his own hands." She left me sitting there, the folder burning in my hands. My mind couldn't process it all. One of those sweet, identical boys wasn't Lorenzo's biological son. The twins who loved each other so completely would be torn apart. I drove back to the Romano estate. This time, when the guards tried to turn me away, I got out of my car and shouted, "Tell Lorenzo that Maya knows about the twins. Tell him I have Victoria Marchesi's folder." 5 minutes later, the gates opened. Lorenzo waited in the library, and he looked terrible. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, dark circles under his eyes. He'd aged a decade in 3 days. "How did you get that?" He stared at the folder in my hands. "Victoria Marchesi gave it to me." I set it on his desk. "She said you're refusing to cooperate." "Cooperate?" Lorenzo laughed harshly. "They want me to let them destroy my family. They want to know which child is theirs. Both children are mine." He slammed his hand on the desk. "I've raised them since birth. I've loved them, protected them, been their father in every way that matters. Biology doesn't change that, I know. But Antonio is a snake who sees an opportunity to take something from me." Lorenzo's voice was deadly quiet. "He'll use this to gain leverage, to weaken my position, to take one of my sons and raise him in his world. What if he's right?" I asked softly. "What if one of them is his biological son? Then he can suffer like I've suffered not knowing." Lorenzo turned away. "I lost my wife. I won't lose my sons. You might lose them both if you don't handle this carefully." He spun back around. "What would you have me do? Let them tear my family apart? Let me help you." The words came out before I'd fully thought them through. "There has to be a way to navigate this that protects the boys." "There isn't." "Then we make one." Lorenzo stared at me for a long moment. "Why? Why do you care so much?" "Because those boys deserve better than adults fighting over them like possessions." Something shifted in Lorenzo's expression. "You really believe that?" "I do. And I think you do too, underneath all the anger and fear. I moved closer to his desk. Let me talk to Antonio. Maybe I can find a middle ground. He'll eat you alive. Maybe, but I have to try. Lorenzo studied me, conflict clear in his eyes. Finally, he nodded. Fine, but I'm coming with you. We met Antonio Marchesi the next day at a neutral location, a private room at an upscale restaurant. Antonio was older than Lorenzo, with gray at his temples and cold eyes that assessed me immediately. The event planner, he said, amused. Lorenzo, you're bringing civilians to negotiations now. Maya is here at her own insistence, Lorenzo replied coldly. I sat down across from Antonio. I saw Victoria's evidence. I understand why you want answers, do you? Antonio leaned back. Then you understand why I won't accept anything less than my son being returned to me. Your biological son, I corrected. But he's been Lorenzo's son for 6 years. You can't erase that. I don't intend to erase it. I intend to correct it by traumatizing to children who love each other. Antonio's expression hardened. By claiming what's mine, they're not possessions. My voice rose despite my attempt to stay calm. They're 6-year-old boys who don't understand why adults are suddenly threatening their family, which is why this should be handled quickly. Test them, identify my son, and begin the transition. Transition. Lorenzo's hands clenched into fists. You mean kidnapping? I mean shared custody at minimum. Full custody ideally. The room went silent. The full horror of what Antonio wanted settled over me. He didn't just want to know which twin was his, he wanted to take that child away completely. That's not acceptable, I said. Antonio looked at me like I was a particularly stupid child. You don't get a vote in this, Ms. Torres. Maybe not. But I'm the one planning their birthday party. I'm the one who sees them every day, who knows what makes them happy. I leaned forward. If you truly care about your biological son, you'll consider what's best for him, not just what you want. I am considering what's best, Antonio said. Growing up in my family, with his real parents, his real heritage, his real parents are dead, Lorenzo said flatly. Alessandra died protecting both of them. That makes them both hers, both mine. The law won't see it that way. Then we don't involve the law. Lorenzo's voice dropped dangerously low. We handle this ourselves. The threat was clear. Antonio smiled, finally. The real Lorenzo Romano, he stood. I tried to be reasonable. But if you want war, we'll have war. And when I win, I'll take both twins just to watch you suffer. He left. Lorenzo immediately called his security team. We're moving the boys, he said. Somewhere safe. Somewhere Antonio can't reach them. Wait. I grabbed his arm. If you run, you look guilty. You look like you're hiding something. I am hiding something. My sons, there's another way. An idea was forming. Desperate and risky. The party. What if we use it? Lorenzo frowned. Use it how? Antonio wants to know which twin is his biological son. We don't know either. But what if we could find out without involving him? I spoke faster as the plan took shape. Medical testing under the guise of party preparations. A health check for the boys before the big day. We get the results first, then decide how to proceed. And if one of them isn't mine biologically, then we figure out how to protect both of them together. I met his eyes. But we do it on our terms, not his. Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Set it up. But Maya, if this goes wrong, if Antonio finds out, he won't. I'll handle it personally. The next day, I arranged for a private pediatrician to come to the estate under the pretense of making sure the twins were healthy before their party. Marco and Matteo barely noticed, used to medical checkups, just a small blood draw, the doctor said cheerfully. Super quick. Both boys were brave. Though Matteo squeezed my hand hard enough to hurt, the results would take 24 hours. The longest 24 hours of my life. Lorenzo and I barely slept. We sat in his study, not talking, just existing in the same space while we waited for news that could shatter everything. What if it's Marco? Lorenzo asked around midnight. What if it's Matteo? I countered. Does it matter? He looked at me. Either way, I lose a son. No, either way. You fight for both of them. The doctor called at noon the next day. Lorenzo put it on speaker, so I could hear. Mr. Romano, the results are conclusive. Both boys show as biological matches to you. We both froze. That's impossible, Lorenzo said. Run the tests again. I ran them 3 times to be certain. Marco and Matteo are definitely your biological sons. After the call ended, Lorenzo and I sat in stunned silence. Victoria's DNA test was wrong, I finally said. Or faked. Antonio lied. Lorenzo's voice was deadly calm. He made up this entire story to create chaos, to weaken my position before making a move. Why would he do that? Because he's been looking for an excuse to go after me for years. This gave him one. Lorenzo stood, already pulling out his phone. He threatened my sons. That's a death sentence in my world. Lorenzo, wait, no more waiting. No more negotiating. His eyes were cold, empty. The dangerous man he'd warned me about was fully present now. Antonio Marchesi dies tonight. I grabbed his arm. You can't just kill him. Watch me. If you do this, you start a war. More people die. Maybe even, I couldn't say it, my sons are safe. That's all that matters, are they? I moved in front of him, forcing him to look at me. If you kill Antonio, his family will come for revenge. They'll target Marco and Matteo. You'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, and so will they. Then I'll kill them too. You can't kill everyone. My voice broke. Lorenzo, please. There has to be another way. There isn't. Then let me find one. I was begging now. Desperate. Give me until the party. 2 more days. If I can't find a solution by then, you can do whatever you think is necessary. Lorenzo stared at me, war raging in his eyes. Why? Why do you care so much about stopping me? Because your sons need their father, not a murderer. I stepped closer. Because I stopped, the words catching in my throat. Because you what? Because I care about you. The admission felt like jumping off a cliff. All of you. This family. And I don't want to watch you destroy yourself. Something in his expression softened. My odd 2 days. Please. Finally. He nodded. 2 days. Then I do this my way. I spent the next 48 hours working harder than I'd ever worked in my life. I called in every favor, contacted every connection, researched until my eyes burned. And slowly, painfully, I found something. Antonio Marchesi had legal troubles, tax evasion charges that he'd managed to keep quiet. If the right people knew about them, if the evidence reached the right authorities, Antonio would be too busy fighting for his freedom to threaten anyone. I compiled everything and gave it to Lorenzo an hour before the party was set to begin. He read through the documents, his expression unreadable. This could destroy him. Without you having to fire a single bullet, he'll know it came from me. Maybe, but he'll be in federal custody. And his family will be too busy with legal defense to start a war. Lorenzo looked at me for a long moment. Then he smiled, a real, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. You're terrifying, you know that. I learned from the best. He laughed and pulled me into a hug that felt like coming home. Thank you, he murmured against my hair, for saving me from myself. The party was perfect. The gardens had been transformed into a pirate's cove, complete with a ship replica in the pool and treasure chests hidden throughout the property. Kids from the twins' school ran around in costume, their laughter filling the air with pure joy. Marco and Matteo were in their element, dressed as pirate captains, their smiles bright enough to rival the sun. They'd been briefed about Antonio's lies and the danger that had passed, explained in terms they could understand. Both boys had hugged Lorenzo tightly, whispering that they loved him. I watched from the sidelines, content to see my work come to life. Lorenzo found me standing near the fountain, observing the chaos. You should be out there, he said. You made this happen. I'm happy here, are you? He moved closer. Happy here, at this party. Or happy here, with us. My breath caught. Lorenzo, I've been thinking about what you said. About caring. He took my hand. I care about you too, Maya. More than I should. More than is safe. Nothing about your life is safe. Then you'll fit right in, he smiled. Stay, not just for the party. Stay with us. Help me raise my sons. Help me be better than I've been. You're asking me to. I'm asking you to be part of this family. However that looks, his eyes were vulnerable, open. What do you say? I looked past him at Marco and Matteo, who were showing their friends the treasure hunt route I'd designed. I looked at the gardens I'd helped transform, at the life I'd somehow become part of. I say yes, I whispered. Lorenzo's smile was brilliant. He pulled me close and kissed me, gentle and promising. While around us the party continued. And the twins laughed and the future opened. Up like a treasure chest full of possibilities. No one had known the Mafia Kings. Twins were threatened with being switched, stolen, really. But everyone would know that Maya Torres had helped protect them, that she'd found a way to save this family without violence, that she'd chosen love over fear. And as the sun set over the Romano estate, painting everything gold, I knew I'd made the right choice. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is open your heart. But sometimes it's also the bravest.